On Monday, May 8, 2006, three former Minnesota governors spoke in Rochester. Governors Wendell Anderson, Albert Quie, and Arne Carlson made an inspiring presentation entitled Past Wisdom, Present Challenges, Future Vision.
I was born, this will shock you, in 1933, and although I had nothing to do with it, about a month later, the legislature, dominated by conservatives, Republicans, and a farmer labor governor, Floyd B. Olson, they passed the first progressive income tax in the country and dedicated it 100% to K through 12 education, which lasted until 1957. And people always say, you know, we put so much money in education, does it pay dividends? In World War II, 11 million men were drafted. Minnesota had the fewest rejections for reasons of education or reasons of health. Does it pay dividends? Of course it does. Then we had the GI Bill, and we created an incredible middle class because of the GI Bill. A GI got their tuition paid of whatever university or college they went to, plus, as I recall, $65 per month if they were single, $100 if they were married, and an extra $10 for each child. It was fantastic. When I attended the University of Minnesota in the fall of 1950, when I was 17 years of age, the tuition was $27 per quarter, 19% of the actual cost. The rest was borne by the taxpayer. My rent at the SAE fraternity house was $16, and I worked for my meals. Anybody could get a university education in Minnesota in those days. Law school, when I graduated in 1960, tuition had jumped to an incredible $100 per quarter. Today, as I speak to you, the increase in tuition at the University of Minnesota and our state colleges, and I say this and I hardly believe it, in 5 years has gone up 85%. If you want to send a child to the University of Minnesota, it's between $18,000 and $19,000 a year for tuition, room, and board. You know, we used to be talked about as the state that works. We had high taxes. Our income grew faster than any of our neighboring states. Of the 48 states, we had the highest percent of our high school graduates going on to college or university. We live longer than the other states. Today, our rate of increase for education has fallen to 26. When they talk about now states at work, they no longer talk about the state of Minnesota. They talk about states like Georgia, which has 4 years scholarship for any high school graduate in Georgia who's in the top 25% of their class. Georgia can do it, and we raise tuition over 85%. About 18 months ago, I spoke at Harding High School, a public school on the old east side of St. Paul where I grew up. I talked to one of the teachers. He said, you know, most of these children do not know who their father is. Over half of them, the first language is not English. And we have over 40 students per class. It's tough. I have a book here, What the United States Can Learn from Sweden's Story, The Swedish Secret. Before I read from it, I would like Al Quie to know that my friend Earl Gustafson, this is his book, he wrote a book, What the United States Can Learn from Norway's Story, The Norwegian Secret, but they didn't publish it because it's only 2.5 pages long. Oxford University ranked the 17 highest income industrial countries, and they published the list. Sweden was number 1, then Norway, Finland, and the Netherlands. Last, the United States of America. I played in a pond hockey game in late January. And one of the players on the other team, who was their best player and their captain, I didn't know him, but my teammates did, and they talked about him. A week later, at the age of 51, he dropped dead, leaving surviving his widow and 4 young children. No money, no insurance. But she was born in Sweden, is a resident of Sweden. Now you can think how we would take care of that widow with 4 kids in Minnesota. And I will tell you what I've suggested to her is go back to Sweden. Within a few months, the kids will be speaking Swedish easily. Here is what would happen in Sweden. Free public education from preschool, Al, through university. Comprehensive universal health care. National child allowance. Unemployment benefits of 80% of former earnings. Job retraining and subsidized daycare. Housing allowance for families with children. Paid parental leaves up to 16 months to care for newborn children. Regular supplementary retirement pensions. Guaranteed 5-week paid vacations. Low-cost public transportation. Subsidized art and cultural programs. That's the vision that Minnesotans should have.
As we look into the future and we recognize the political gridlock that seems to occur here and nationwide, this is not the first time there was gridlock. And I just remind people that when I became governor, I felt that something was happening. We're resting on our laurels in public education. And we needed to do something about it. So I thought one thing I would do was to push legislation to reduce class size. In the House of Representatives, which was evenly divided, every Republican voted for my bill to reduce class size, and every DFL voted against it, and on a tie vote, it did not go through. Now I share that with you, because if that vote was today, and we had, and you leave the governor out of it, probably every DFL member would vote for it, and maybe every Republican would vote against it, who knows. But that kind of gridlock can only be stopped by what you're doing here. Coffee and conversation. Citizens need to come together and not put labels on each other and say, well, I got that person picked. Because the one thing I found out, that people, not only who look like most of you do out here, but a different color skin, different religion, all kinds of different, the infinite worth of each individual and the wisdom that you can find in each one of them. And that's what we can probe and find out. I've said it over and over again. And those of you who came to my birthday party with a few people who were there, I said it's the greatest crime we commit. The greatest crime we commit is in the neglect of preschool children. You just have to look at where we are. When I was in high school, I knew nobody but what both parents worked. But they worked in the same establishment, on the farm or in the grocery store or what have you. And they could be home. Now, both parents work, but they work at different places. And they're gone. 73% of the women with preschool children in Minnesota work outside of the home. So you look at what's necessary. We have inadequate preschool programs. And the legislature is refusing even to pass a bill that will provide quality improvement, understanding of the quality rating of the program, so parents can tell which ones are good. You see, what we're looking at are people who denied the opportunity to provide the answers to all the problems that we have, and you don't do that without an education. You don't do that unless you start out in the early years. It's in the 4th grade that we lose kids, in the 4th grade. Every child goes with hope. But when they reach the 4th grade and they are behind, they know they are inadequate. And their parents realize they are inadequate. And the teacher comes to the conclusion that they are inadequate with 40 kids in the class. And that's what the student is doomed with. The most powerful force is faith. Now, when a teacher came to me when I was behind and in grade school and said to me, Albert, if you will stay in over the noon hour, I will tutor you. And I did. What caused me to do that rather than go out and play, I don't know. But I'm so thankful to her that she took that time to tutor me. When I'm asking you to look into the future, with most people working when children are preschool, think on how it can be automatic, where the parents can spend a part of the time of the day with their children. When I visited Kids Corner Educare Center in Owatonna, I saw that's what Owatonna was doing for them. When I see Best Buy, where the parents can bring their children there, that you have that automatic relationship. See, we need to think in that way off into the future, where we want to be and how we can help the wonderful children become what God intended them to be. Second one I wanted to mention while I'm up here is I just see how western Hennepin County grows with houses. Where I was riding my horses, I can't ride there because they're houses. Clog the highways. And I was mentioning to Ernie and Wendy when we came in that added lane on 494 where it swings and goes up north, on the southwest corner there. With that extra lane, you can go in the rush hour now and get through all right. So some thoughtful way of that. But I look at it further. You got to think 100 years ahead. And I think of Minnesota. Now that we've proven that a light rail system works, and a guy who didn't think it was going to work when it started is saying this, I think we ought to look farther ahead and think of Minnesota in this. You ought to run a line to Rochester, to Mankato, and to St. Cloud. And when you do that, and then it will be the same thing that happened like on the Strip in Minneapolis, how businesses, there were more jobs out there than were in Minneapolis. Think far enough ahead. And that's the problem in this wonderful system of politics, is to get people to think beyond the next election. And the third one I want to say is, we are in a deplorable situation when companies can't even stay alive because of the cost of health care. Here's Mayo Clinic. You got to provide leadership. But bear this in mind in health care. There was a program for the War on Poverty that they called it Green Thumb. And it was for people out in the rural area who were poor and old, could just help in a park or something, clean the roadsides and what have you. They paid them a little bit of money. The reason why they did it when I talked to them was they wanted to have some money to help pay for their medicine. When they were working and relating to each other, the most amazing thing is they didn't need to spend that money on medicine anymore. They became healthier because of it. For the older citizens of America, the healthiest thing they can do is to help somebody else. So you see the vision that we have to have, where we're intergenerational. We're caring for each other. And folks in my party, government has to play a part in it as well. Just bear that in mind. government has to play a part in that as well.
Right now, I would contend that the United States and the state of Minnesota is really on the cusp of a major transition. And the future is going to belong to those people who prepare for it. The two big events that I just want to touch on briefly today are, one, the global economy and what it means, both in terms of the challenges as well as the opportunities. And the second is the impact of the retirement of the baby boomers. Governor Quee mentioned that it was his belief that there was this feeling in Minnesota that we could live off our past. I think that's eminently true. I think that's true throughout the entire United States, that somehow there's an invisible hand that's over us, it will guide us no matter what we do. Well, when you're generating deficits in excess of $800 billion a year, believe me, no invisible hand can save you. So if there's a political tsunami coming this fall, we ought not to be surprised, and the least surprised should be the incumbents. For that, you can applaud. No, I mean it very sincerely. I am very, very tired of putting loyalty to party and to those who control party above loyalty to nation, to state, and to community. When you take a look at the rising economies all over the world, particularly Japan, China, India. In just India and China alone, they're graduating over 500,000 scientists and engineers per year, and that number is increasing. We're graduating 60,000, and that number is decreasing. That's our challenge. The second challenge is the retirement of our baby boomers, which means, as both governors have so clearly stated, we as a society cannot afford to lose one single individual. We're going to have to maximize our talents, maximize our educational commitment if we're going to get the kinds of outcomes that can supply our economic system the kinds of talent it needs to succeed in the United States and on a global market. And yet we're not even talking about it. Our political system, being skewed to the left and the right, is much more concerned with problems of the social agenda. Every single year, without exception now, our political system and our political leadership raises an issue designed to sharply divide Americans. And then the whole focus of the media is around the contentious debate that takes place. Oh, it can be guns, it can be abortion, it can be gays, it can be teaching creationism in our schools. Not one of those concerns will help us compete more effectively in a global economy. Not one of those concerns will give us more favorable educational outcomes, and not one of them will deal with the problems of the retirement of our baby boomers and our ability to even have a retirement system in America. So the opportunity for those of you seeking public office is to start to put together a new agenda. And my prayer is that that agenda will be based on several ingredients. The first is a very honest review of global opportunity and an assessment of our strengths and our drawbacks. And then presenting to the public a strategy as to how we get there. Don't pretend it's going to be easy. Don't pretend you can do it on the cheap. And don't pretend that everything that the public is expected to swallow will be dessert. This is going to be tough. When we look back on that generation that had such an enormous influence on us, referred to often now as the greatest generation, they never told America, oh, life's going to be easy. Boy, is that World War II a cakewalk. And the Cold War, an absolute breeze. No. We were challenged and challenged and challenged. They never summoned us to a life of ease. They told us it was going to be difficult. Well, that's where we are today. We're not beaten. We have no reason to be pessimistic. But we have every reason to be cautious and to commit ourselves to an agenda that's going to involve some fundamental changes to give us the kinds of outcomes that we need. And philosophically, what does that mean? Philosophically means that every single child in this nation and this state shall have access to good education and good health care. It means that in terms of higher education, we cannot tolerate any kind of a system that increasingly draws the string of opportunity against our young people. We can all sit back and worship the GI Bill. But maybe the time has come for us to recommit ourselves to it and to say that every single young person is going to have access to as far as they can go in higher education. And the job of government is to create a strategy of funding. How do we maximize that opportunity? We're going to have to decide what it is that we're willing to pay, what it is that we're willing to commit, what is it that we're willing to do for the greater success to prevail. That is our challenge. And finally, it takes a political system that focuses on the long term. We're not going to win the war of global competition based on a short-term observation. Governor Quee mentioned, oh Lord, get me through the next election cycle. Sadly, that has become the prayer of incumbency. The prayer ought to be, oh, what can I do to more effectively serve the long term of my people? And I truly and sincerely hope that each and every one of us will really begin to focus a vision on where it is that we want to go. Every single one of America's great leaders had that vision, had the ability to summon people away from being average into performing at the highest level possible. And that's the kind of leadership that we need today. Yeah, the challenges are there. There's no question about it. But we know that the current direction is going to get us nowhere except a continuing drive toward mediocrity. The time has come for the national government to bring its budgets into balance. To begin to truthfully communicate to the American people what the strategies are. And for all of us on a state or national level to stay away from the side issues and start to focus on those concerns that bring us together. Thank you.
Our first question. What should the United States do about the coming oil peak?
Send everybody a $100 check.
What do you recommend citizens do to encourage or require state-level politicians to work together over party lines?
I think much of working together obviously is based on the ability to form a human relationship. But I think the political system is very deeply skewed, and it does not lend itself very easily to any form of compromise. When you elect or nominate ideologues, be they left or right, they only answer to their ideology. They don't see compromise as a high virtue. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. They can go back to their constituents' base and continue to demonize the other side, whip them up into a frenzy, and get themselves reelected. So accomplishing something may not be very high on their agenda. The truth of the matter is what built the strength of Minnesota was its phenomenal ability within its political parties to be centrist. From there, you can always negotiate. The challenge, I would argue, is for the middle, the broad middle, which is the overwhelming majority, not only in Minnesota, but in the United States, to begin to take charge of the political process and to start putting loyalty to candidates who have a vision, who have a centrist message, put that loyalty well above parties. Let me just close my own message on this note. I find absolutely nothing conservative about rolling out $800 billion deficits per year. Absolutely nothing. I find nothing conservative at all of looking at our children and saying, we're going to leave this debt to you. I find nothing conservative about in any way, shape, or form being untruthful to the American people.
The other thing I want to mention to you, we are on the verge of making another huge mistake because of a White decision by the Supreme Court in which they said that you can engage in partisan elections for judges. If we go the Texas way, where they're campaigning on the issues, if we go to, say, like Illinois, they spent $9.3 million on one judge's election. And so I wanted to mention that for you folks, because I'd like your help in getting that constitutional amendment changed.
I want people on the bench who are independent of the other two branches of government and not a copy of them. In any event, the question is well-meaning, and I think on behalf of Governor Anderson and Governor Quay, we're flattered to be asked our opinion. We're flattered to be able to participate, and we're flattered to be here today, and we thank you ever so much for the very kind invitation. Thank you.
Gentlemen. Thank you, each of you.